AV or the cameras are? Okay.
At this point, I don't know if they're working. The community development director is online looking now, and it's not up. So
Okay, all right. I gave them a few seconds to see if they need to turn something on. The meeting. Okay. And they're ready to live broadcast? Okay, all right. I call to order the May 6th, 2024 meeting of the City of West Sacramento's Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission. We will begin with the land acknowledgement and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Rohr.
Thank you very much. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we live, work, learn, and commune is the original homelands of the indigenous people of West Sacramento, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We acknowledge and we thank the original inhabitants who have occupied, maintained, and secured this place and who still exist on this land. We respect and celebrate the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land on which we gather. Thank you. You'll join me, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to move on to the General Administration Function Part 1. I believe public comments are in this section. We did receive some written comments. One was concerning recent school lockdowns. The Commissioner appreciates these written comments. However, we do not believe that this is in the jurisdiction of the Commission, but we do acknowledge that we have received that. We received another public comment concerning speeding on, I believe, 5th and E or C, and there were some accompanying photos, and I want to encourage the commissioners to review that email and take a look at those. And I'm going to move on and ask, do we have any public comments in the room in person?
We have a public comment on traffic safety and concern, but no item on the agenda.
Okay. And the public may speak on this item for 3 minutes. However, the commission is forbidden from discussing that item.
May we hear from Joanne?
Thanks. I'm glad I had company. I felt pretty lonely at first. My name's Joanne Ronning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I was here 2 months ago, and that was mainly expressing my concern for a particular intersection. However, it continues the same on F Street and all along 5th Street there. But I ran out of time before I got to the most important part, which is my suggestions for how to improve things. So it's specifically the corner where I live is on 5th Street and E, and I see and hear a lot that goes on there. The posted limit on that street is 35, but I'm guessing the average is at least 50 miles an hour. It would be interesting to have a sign that tells the driver what speed they're going along with the 35 as a reminder. Just this afternoon, I had a very shocking, frightening experience trying to cross in a crosswalk on my bike. That was on F Street. And I literally had to put my hand up like this, and I had a bright vest on. And, one guy just zoomed on by, and I yelled, "Slow down." And it makes no effect. Anyway, it's a very bad habit by many people, and I think what's needed are, I don't think a traffic light is actually the answer, surprisingly, because most of it seems to be during commute times, morning and late afternoon. So I think what's needed are ways to just raise the awareness that people are speeding and catch their attention that there are actually beautiful crosswalks there that they totally ignore. There's only one sign which doesn't say anything. It's just a bright neon sign with a cartoon person. So because they show no respect for pedestrians or bikers, they totally act like they have the right of way. And I actually call it the Fifth Street Freeway. I'm not exaggerating it, really. It's very frightening. Sometimes I hear cars like as if they were on the Indy 500. It's amazing. So if the city of West Sac needs funds, I would say that's a very good source of revenue if they have enough cops to put tickets out. That will start getting people's attention. But here's my 3 wishes, the most in order. And I trust that some of you have seen the pictures that Diana sent. Oh no, my timer. Okay, I'm almost done. 3 things I'm hoping can happen. Those neon signs that are in the middle of the median that simply say, state law, yield to pedestrians. And the second one is like on 3rd Street, a very quiet street, you push the button and the sign flashes, and it definitely gets people's attention. And then you can feel safer crossing. And the third is, as I said, the sign that shows what speed people are going along with the speed limit. So that's my say, and thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We appreciate that you've come back. Are there any other public comments?
Not at this time.
Okay, and with that, we are going to move on to the consent agenda. The commission has two sets of minutes to review and approve from the previous 2 meetings. Commissioners, the January 8th, 2024 minutes, is there a motion to approve?
A second.
A second. Would you like to take the roll, Ms. Cruz?
Chair Zimmer,
Aye.
Commissioner Banks,
Aye.
Commissioner Kashkowli, Commissioner Rohr,
Aye.
Commissioner Zuniga,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hess.
And with that, the motion passes. The commission approves the minutes of the January 8th, 2024 meeting. Moving on to the March 4th, 2024 meeting. Commissioners, do I hear a motion to approve?
A motion.
Okay. Ms. Cruz? Aye.
Commissioner Banks,
Aye.
Commissioner Rohr,
Aye.
Commissioner Zuniga,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hess.
With that, the motion is passed to approve the March 4th, 2024 minutes. And now we're going to move on to the regular agenda. We have a presentation on the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan 2024 interim update by staff. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening. I'm Steve Rosen, and thanks for following along on your slideshows in front of you. I guess I'll ask you to turn the pages when it's time to turn the pages. Tonight I'll be sharing our progress on the interim update to the Bike Ped Trails Master Plan of 2018. The Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Master Plan, or BPTMP, is the city's plan for infrastructure for people who get around town by walking, bicycling, scooting, rolling, skating, and using mobility devices, and anything else you can think of that isn't a car, or an airplane, or a boat. Our current plan was adopted in 2018 and is based on work done in 2016 and 2017, so it reflects the conditions of those times, and it needs a thorough update to reflect the changes to the streetscape and to show the progress we've made since then. We need to keep it updated so that we qualify for funding from federal and state sources, so that it reflects what the walkers and cyclists of the cities want and the problems they currently face, and so that it shows what we've accomplished and what plans for the future we've made since then. We applied for a Caltrans grant to give the plan the thorough update based on the big public engagement push and the comprehensive survey of the transportation network. We're waiting to hear whether it will be awarded that grant. But for now, we need this interim update so that we can move forward on new initiatives. Please turn your page. We intend to become one of the country's top bicycle and pedestrian-friendly communities. This is our vision, and the city has been working toward it since just after the incorporation in 1987, when in 1991 we adopted the first bicycle transportation plan. Please turn your page. And we should be on a page that says BPTM goal. And that's what I should have read. And then now we should be looking at two maps, one that says existing bicycle facilities and one that says Figure 10, existing and proposed bicycle trails network. The map on the left shows the bikeways and trails as they existed in 2016, and the map on the right shows the plan we've been working towards since 2018. It shows the major and minor trail network extensions, including the plan's 4 signature projects: the West Capitol Avenue Bikeway, the I Street Bridge deck conversion, Southport Levee Trail, and the Sycamore Trail. Now, if you'd please turn your page again, you will see on the left the 2018 plan, and on the right the proposed 2024 plan. That incorporates the network segments we've built since 2018 and shows new planned bikeways and trails. Some of these new ones are ones we've begun work on, and others reflect opportunities we've just identified. You turn your page again, please. You'll see a list. Those include the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail. Well, that's been on our plans for a long time, but we've identified some new great opportunities. One of which is to extend the trail south of the city limits to Clarksburg along the former Yola Shortline Railroad or Sacramento Northern Railroad, depending on what era of time where the documents are talking about. As far as going south, the Yola Delta Trail Coalition, which is a partnership between Yola County Transportation District, the state's Delta Protection Commission, and the city. We've signed a memorandum of understanding to work toward building that trail and have applied for funding for construction design and right-of-way work. And from the northern end of the trail from the trail's existing northern end, we've identified an opportunity to extend it along the Sacramento Northern Railroad right-of-way up over the levee or on the embankment, not a levee, through the bridge district, over that little bridge and up into Bright. That's an exciting opportunity we've just identified. Another one is the Lake Washington Parkway, and that includes ongoing projects and new proposals. It'll connect the Causeway Trail that goes over to Davis, down all the way to the Levee Trail, along a mostly separated trail. That includes a project it's in design called the Port Industrial Infrastructure Project. That will include the first segment of that separated trail between Industrial Boulevard and the port, and some other improvements in the port area, including extending up Harbor Drive and around the Bike Dog area. Mike, don't turn your pages, turn mine. Another one is the Enterprise and West Capitol I-80 crossing. The YOLO Managed Lanes project gives us an opportunity to work toward extending a trail underneath the causeway between the end of Enterprise Road and West Capitol Avenue, way over at the west edge of the city. That will get people from the future Enterprise Bridge crossing and that Lake Washington Parkway up and around to West Capitol Avenue and to the YOLO Causeway Bikeway. Because right now there's no room to widen the sidewalks or build a bikeway underneath the bridges, the freeway bridge over Enterprise Boulevard right there. Let's see, the last one. Well, not the last one. The map also has been updated to show the finished work and proposed work to connect the Bridge District and the baseball park down toward 15th Street. That shows the Riverfront Street extension, which is finished, the Fifth Street Cycleway, which has just been completed, And it also shows a bikeway along Drever Street to connect that area. There's never been a better way to get from Southport to the central part of West Sacramento. And that's a really exciting development that was not shown in the old plan. The last one up on the new plans part is the Sacramento Avenue Complete Street Improvement Plan, which was not shown in the 2018 plan. So it's important to show it here. And Stephanie will be telling you all about that later this evening. There's some minor changes include, well, this one's not a minor change, but we're changing the Enterprise Crossing will be a class 1 bikeway over the Deepwater Ship Channel that will connect all of that job centers south to Southport and north up to West Capitol Avenue through the West Capitol Avenue and Enterprise undercrossing I discussed earlier. Shows the I Street Bridge. And excuse me, this update shows the progress we've made toward building the I Street Bridge and the Sycamore Trail. And it includes C Street Bridge now, which was a thing that when the prior plan missed out showing. And then if we'll go to the next page, our next steps for this project will be to take this interim update to the City Council with your comments on May 15th. And then the next step after that will be to get the results of the grant application for the full update this summer. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this interim update and take your comments to the City Council for you. Thanks.
Maybe segment.
Yeah, I'll open it up, talk about the Sycamore Trail. The phase 4 in particular, that tunnel. I noticed in the agenda packet that phase 3 looks like completion in 2026 for phase 3. But it doesn't have anything specific about phase 4 for the tunnel. So if you have an idea of when that could expect to be done or worked on, that would be great. Or maybe you won't know until the grant application update in the summer.
Well, for that one, we won in partnership with the SACOG, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, we've won a Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. The purpose of that grant is to repair the damage done to neighborhoods and on a local level by infrastructure meant to serve the national economy. So that will help us move forward on that project. That is a complicated project that will take a long time because we need to work with the Union Pacific Railroad, but we are going to get started.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you for that update.
Hi there. I just had a question about the distinctions between the classes.
Okay.
How are they distinct?
So a class 1 trail is a separate facility where cars are excluded. It can be near a road or it can be off in the countryside. For instance, we're going to have a class 1 trail between Industrial Boulevard and the port facility on the south side of the road. Like when you're driving along the port, you see the train tracks and that big broad swath of lawn. There's going to be a trail there. That'll be a class 1. Another trail, or example of a trail is the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail, where it's currently paved, where it runs behind the high school. Those are 2 kinds of class 1 trails. They're paved and have no cars. Class 2 is a bike lane, so it's a striped facility on a road where cars are not allowed. And that can be either have the parking, it can either be against the curb or have the parking between it and the curb. but there's no vertical separation. It's just paint. A Class 3 on-street bike route can look like a lot of different things, but what it is where the bikes and the cars share space. But the purpose of calling it a Class 3 route is to prioritize bicycle movement there. And that can either be one way it manifests itself. We manifest it is we know that it's a quiet street that doesn't have a lot of cars, so we encourage bicyclists to use that one instead of a street that has a lot of cars, so that even though they're sharing space with the cars are moving slow and there's not very many of them, and it's a safer place for them to be. And the Class 4 is a bike lane that is on a street, but it has some kind of vertical separator, and that can be the plastic pylons. It can be a curb, like it can be next to the street, but up on a little curb. But it's something where it looks like a bike lane, but it's more serious than paint.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, is there additional questions about Sycamore Trail or the classes before we move on to other segments?
Yes, I know it's coming up soon, but do we have a date for the Sycamore Trail Bridge to be open?
Estimated completion date 2024, and then the trail south to Stone Boulevard 2026.
Great. Any month idea on that one? Or?
No.
Okay, cool.
June? All right, summer 2024
All right. Thank you.
for the bridge.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on Sycamore Trail?
Let's see. No.
Okay. Commissioners, are there other segments you would like to discuss? Oh,
Actually, one more on Sycamore Trail. I believe at City Council there was some comment given about the lighting infrastructure along the Sycamore Trail. Do we know if any response has been given to that, or if what the sort of state of repair is for the public lighting is along the Sycamore Trail?
I do not. I will email.
We'll definitely look into that for the commission. I don't either, but that's something that is probably coming out of capital projects, so we can coordinate with them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Commissioners, other comments on other segments or trails?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about the Southport Levee Trail. I know it's a very well-traveled by bicyclists trail there, and most of it is gravel. Is the dotted green line that's kind of going along the Sacramento River down to the southern reaches of our city? Is it going to be a separate paved trail next to the current gravel levee, where it's separated by the gates, it's got the accessibility signs and everything, or is the plan is to pave over that gravel levee top?
The levee top will be paved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I hear word that, will there be a horse trail down in the bottom of the levee along it where the access for the maintenance road guys go?
In some locations, so one, you are correct, the top is going to be paved, and it's currently in design with capital projects, and it's a grant-funded effort. So that should be moving forward, pretty soon, within the next, I would say, next 2 years. You'll probably see construction funding dependent. And then in some cases, there are areas where there is equestrian facilities alongside that. And there's also locations where we're putting trailheads. So without a map in front of me, I couldn't point to it, but I can direct you to, again, capital projects who can give you the most up-to-date, as well as the parks. The parks plan should have a lot of those exhibits there to show where some of these facilities are.
Great. Has there been any pushback from public to say, like, no, we'd rather have it gravel?
Not that I've heard, no.
Okay.
Any other comments about the Southport Levee Trail? How about other trails?
I would have a question about the enterprise section. So you were mentioning the tunnel. Can you expand on the potential solution you would put in there?
Well, the end of the, so Okay, at the very far west end of the city where West Capitol Avenue and Enterprise meet each other, there's no room to build any more facilities under that freeway there. So a solution we've identified is to extend a Class 1 trail farther to the west underneath the causeway where the freeway is already elevated and there's already a channel of water running underneath it.
I do want to interject one thing. Jason McCoy, Supervising Transportation Planner. We haven't talked about this, but we are going to be kicking off the Enterprise Bridge design effort. We have selected firm HDR, and it is a locally funded project to study the entire corridor to make it more bicycle pedestrian friendly. It includes putting accessible sidewalks, bike lanes. There's going to be a mixture because of the width of the current roadway. There's going to be a mix of Class 2, Class 1s that are happening. But we are looking at a potential for the underneath the I-80 freeway that crosses over Enterprise at West Capitol at potentially reducing by one lane to allow a two-way cycle track to go under there. However, it does require us to study traffic over there to make sure that we understand what the traffic impacts are associated with that and whether or not from a design perspective we can do that and how much coordination we're going to get from Caltrans. So we're going to look at that, but Steve is correct that our fallback position is one that was actually identified early by Caltrans in coordination with us, and that's going around underneath the causeway and then back around to the bike trail on the north side of I-80.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. There is already a gravel path underneath the freeway there. I will note that it does flood pretty frequently when there's any water in the bypass. So that might be the only issue, is that it's underwater pretty substantially in the wintertime. But it's good to hear that we're thinking about making that connection. So that's a good thought.
I had a quick question about dirt trails.
Sure.
And how they're kind of prioritized and maintained by the city. I do notice one of my very favorite trails to ride on the northern reach of the Bright neighborhood, the Brown Trail along and pretty much in between the Broderick Boat Ramp and the northern tip of Bright Park. It's a dirt trail bordered by wood on either side, and it's a big favorite around here, and as well as the Barge Canal Trail. Those are the only two that I see marked as unpaved trails, and I was wondering if there was any sort of, priority or design given to maintaining or perhaps even creating new unpaved trails for within the city.
Not in the last update or the last full planning effort.
Mhm.
That sounds like that's a big enough policy change that we wouldn't incorporate it into this interim plan.
Yeah.
But we have no plans to pave the Deepwater Ship Channel, for instance.
Okay, yeah, and I'm kind of giving kind of credence to the idea that sometimes dirt trails are preferable to paved trails and an important resource that the city has. There's a couple networks kind of over by the Lake Washington Parkway area that are sort of existing, I guess, colloquially used dirt trail networks around in our city that are very heavily used and really treasured. And I wanted to ask about the area where the ropes course was. I had heard ideas that was being made into a bicycle pump track or kind of dirt trail network, as well as the Honda Hills, sort of right by the just south of the locks, where the South River Road begins, where it's blocked off to traffic. And I don't know if that's a Parks Department thing on the other, and maybe outside of the scope of this project that's being presented today.
This plan is more about biking and walking as transportation.
Right.
Where I think that sounds like that ropes course is a city park.
Okay.
And the area south of the locks is a economic development property that they have plans for.
Right.
And the plans include offices, restaurants, and houses. or
Yeah.
apartments. So they currently don't include keeping the pump track for the jumps.
Okay. I do hope that there is some future for that in our city, because that's one of those places that doesn't come back once it's gone. And many cities invest lots and lots of money to get facilities like that. But would it be a parks sort of department to ask to kind of get more information about the ropes course area?
That sounds like there's a recreational facility like that would be the parks.
Great. Okay, thank you.
If you wanted people to pump on their commute to work to be 5 miles of pump, then that might be this plan, but no.
You can always cut through. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, since you brought up some of the dirt track in Bright and on the northern part of the city, I do have one comment. Actually, maybe I have two comments. The dirt track that extends north of Bright Park sort of ends near Bright Park, and then it informally continues along the river a bit north until it hits a gate, which is a U.S. Army Corps facility. There are, and I've looked on a map, I believe it's 800 feet between that gate and the other gate that blocks access and what looks to me like an old trail. I don't know if it's in the city's, if it's possible for the city to potentially negotiate with the U.S. Army Corps to build a bicycle right-of-way, but if you were to do that, you could have a bicycle trail all the way from the Broderick Boat Ramp all the way to Riverbank Road. Currently on the map in pink, it's shown a on-street bike route, which is fine. Like, that's a pretty quiet road on Riverbank Road, but it would be really nice for the residents to be able to access the river from the Bright neighborhood without having to walk all the way to Bright Park to get around the facilities along the north side of the river, because there already is a trail there for most of it. So that's comment number one. The second comment, which is potentially the more serious comment, is that there is a Class 3 bike route along Riverbank Road on the very northern part of the city. If you look at the very northern tip of the map, there is, going north along the river is a Class 3 bike route. That's over by the wastewater treatment plant. And then it connects, as it goes west, to area out toward the Yolo bypass along the Sacramento Weir. And that area to the west is a gravel trail. People do frequently use it. It is a good route to get around some of the city to get over to the Enterprise Bridge area. However, the segment between along Riverbank Road, where it goes underneath I-80 all the way to the Sacramento Weir, is not very long. It's maybe a quarter mile, but it is very treacherous. It is not at all friendly for biking. And there's traffic going 45, 50 miles an hour, and there's no shoulder, and there's a lot of gravel on the road. And I ride it, and I hate riding it. I live up there, and I don't even like riding that road. I'd rather walk in the burrs than ride that road. So my suggestion to the city is that the city appears to own some of the land along the river near the wastewater treatment plant. In fact, I believe there's an intake. One of the things that might be a solution is potentially putting a trail below on the riverside, the eastern side of the road, so that we don't have cyclists on the road. That's one option. The other option is that there's train tracks. And it looks to me like you've already got a Class 4 separated bike lane planned along those railroad tracks. That would be another spot. That's the other side. That would be the western side of the road. Potentially, you could have a bike route along the existing rail tracks, which they're used a little bit, but they're not used very often. They kind of dead end right at the weir. So they're basically used to park. It looks to me like to park extra equipment, and that's about it. So those are two locations. You could actually put a bike lane on either side through some of what is already city property, rather than having people ride on the road. Because right now that road connection, I don't think it's viable, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
Madam Chair, I can comment a little bit that the Army Corps of Engineers is going to be doing a project on the north end of the city there in that area in order to improve the levee conditions there. That's being done in conjunction with West Sacramento Flood Control. So there is an opportunity for us, and we have brought it up, telling them, hey, this is an opportunity for us to figure out how to provide a connection in there. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how much leverage the city is going to have to interject at this point, because my understanding is a lot of that work has been designed, but we are in the process of still communicating, particularly with West Safeco, who is working directly with them to see if there is a way that we can kind of muscle in there and do something. But it is a good opportunity, especially because of the work that they're doing. Anything that we're doing on the river side does require extensive permitting and an extensive cost if anything's going to be done there. So we'll do our best to see if we can do something.
I would love to add on to that comment of why that road is so dangerous and unwelcoming is the sign right at the Harbor and Sacramento intersection leading up into that road is a sign that says closed to, or no truck traffic allowed, a sign that is flaunted on the daily by trucks of all sizes and shapes. And whatever the city can do to really help enforce that would go a very, very long way.
Great. Any other comments on trails in that area, potentially? Okay, commissioners, any other comments on other segments or other general comments?
I'd like to thank city staff for their ambition in this project. It's a true inspiration, and I do think that this, looking at this map, I do see something that is really inspirational to all of the city governments in our area, both Sac County and Yolo. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, I'd like to second that comment as well. This is great, and it's great to see the update, and we really appreciate you coming and sharing this with us.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the regular agenda, and I believe we have another staff presentation. This is the workshop on the city's on-demand rideshare program budget and service parameters. Oops. Welcome.
Hello. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Stephanie Chan. I'm a senior transportation planner with the Transportation and Mobility Division of the Community Development Department. Tonight, our first presentation will be on the on-demand rideshare program budget and service parameters. Last time I presented to TMI Commission was back in, I believe, November of 2023. And we went over the upcoming funding constraints and kind of a general discussion of how the program is operating and how, if TMI Commission had any comments, to return to City Council for feedback as we end the term of our current on-demand rideshare contract with Nomad Transit, or also more commonly known as VIA. So tonight I bring back this item after we have gone through the request for proposals effort, and also have a few updates on budget numbers for the upcoming fiscal year to provide TMI Commission with an update on the expected program budget and potential discussion on service parameter changes. So you can go to the next slide. And as you remember, the on-demand rideshare program was launched in 2018 after extensive coordination with the TMI Commission and the City Council dating back to 2016. We awarded a contract to Nomad Transit, a subsidiary of VIA, and Nomad provided us with a turnkey on-demand rideshare service. So they provided the vehicles, the drivers, the technology platform. Next slide. This slide just goes over the program goals again, just so you have it in front of you. These are the program goals that city staff presented back in November and also presented to council shortly thereafter to include into the request for proposals. Next slide. So this slide is on-demand rideshare program operations. Just as a reminder of how we currently operate the program, VIA provides corner-to-corner rideshare service within West Sacramento. There are 11 hybrid Toyota Siennas, inclusive of 3 Waves, wheelchair-accessible vehicles. The program currently operates on Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., on Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., and on Sundays, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Fares are currently $3.50 plus $1 for additional passengers for just a regular fare. We also offer discounted fares for seniors or persons with disabilities as long as they verify with the city, and that's a half-off discount. And then we also offer a frequent rider pass that we call Via Pass. This pass is $15 for 4 rides a day for 7 days a week. Next slide. And this slide is just providing you some detail on program performance. So we have provided over 824,000 rides since the service launched in May of 2018, and that's to March of 2024. For fiscal year 2024, so starting in July to March of 2024, we've provided over 142,000 rides. We average a weekly ridership of about nearly 4,000 rides and a daily ridership of approximately near 600 rides. The staff report in the table 1 provides a bit more context and data for you to look at, but overall this just provides TMI Commission with information showing that, like, since we launched our service, you can just see our current fiscal year has a higher average of weekly rides, daily rides. The service has grown in demand over the year, but we have been able to maintain a comparable level of operations. So in comparison to like the increasing daily and weekly rides, you can see that our average estimated pickup time has stayed under 15 minutes, and our percentage of rides picked up within 5 minutes of the scheduled pickup time is still near like at 87%, so that's a pretty high percentage. And people still generally walk a short distance to their pickup location. It's under an average about 100 feet, so overall, we've been maintaining a service that provides the parameters that City Council and TMI Commission set out to provide when we began the program. You can go to the next slide. So, as I mentioned, tonight's discussion is on the future of our on-demand rideshare program, and fiscal year 23-24 is our 5th and final contract extension with Nomad Transit. We released the RFI back in July of 2023, got some information from the market, felt that we could put out an RFP that we could have some competition. And so we released the RFP in December 2023, closed the RFP in January 2024. And during that RFP, we received 3 proposals. Our evaluation panel went through those 3 proposals, did interviews, did some follow-up questions, and the evaluation panel ranked Nomad Transit as the highest ranked firm. So our current provider, our incumbent, as the highest ranked firm. Next slide. So this slide, slide 7 on the Transportation Development Act, is something that you saw back in November of 2023. This is just showing the annual allocations to expenditures. I just wanted to show this slide again to give you a refresher that our typical annual allocation, so after the money that we receive from TDA after we have to pay off SACOG for their planning fees, for YOLO TD for their planning fees or administrative fees, plus their providing the YOLO bus service, we kind of get around $1 million left over in local transportation funds to use for our local needs. The VIA contract has typically exceeded the TDA allocations annually. We have drawn upon TDA reserves, so the prior year funding that we kind of saved up before the VIA program was launched. We had reserves in the TDA program that we've just been drawing upon, and we're getting to the point where we are nearing the use of all of that reserve. And so we presented this information to TMI Commission back in November, and this is just a slide to, again, reiterate that point. So the next slide is the TDA funding estimated balance for fiscal year 24-25, slide 8. So around March, we get our preliminary TDA allocations from SACOG. And we use, after that, YOLO TD uses those numbers to figure out their budget, which we get on April 30th. And then we use that preliminary information to estimate how much available TDA funding we have. So this information on this slide is just estimating how much TDA remaining balance do we have to use for fiscal year 24-25. So the first column with information is the carryover from previous years. So this is the reserves I'm talking about. When we don't use up all the TDA funding that we've had in the past, we have a reserve. So we have reserves that date back, again, prior to we had to use up like the oldest money we get first. So this is just the reserve we have left. So we have about 1.04 million in our reserve. And then for fiscal year 24-25, we got an allocation of a total of 4.16 million that comprised of 3.51 million in LTF and $640,000-ish in STA. And so LTF and STA have different uses. As we've reported in the past, STA is a bit more stringent on what they're used for and typically used for transit planning purposes. And then LTF typically is a bit more flexible, and your local agencies can utilize that funding for other planning studies, bike bed, ped projects, whatever it may be, as long as we pay our obligations first, essentially. So with that said, total available after our allocations is nearly 5.21 million in total for TDA. And then looking at the SACOG administrative fees, the YOLO TD fees, and then also the city staff typically pulls a bit of that funding to support the transit shelter maintenance because transit shelter maintenance is upon the local agencies. We estimate that the total claim that we have to make for LTF and STA adds up to about 3.01 million. So of that 5.21 million that we have available, we're spending 3.01 million for all these other expenses that we have to pay to SACOG, YOLO TD, and for maintaining our bus shelters. And that means that we have a remaining balance of approximately 2.19 million this fiscal year. And you'll see at the note on the bottom, NOMAD proposes a 3-year initial contract through June 2027 with 3 1-year extensions following after that to 2030. The pricing structure for the first 3 years means that the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget, I apologize, I don't think I put that number on the slide, but it's approximately 3.2 million, and then they're estimating about 3.3% consumer price index inflation for the following 2 years after. So the fiscal year 25-26 contract budget proposed is 3.34 million, and then goes up to 3.44 million for fiscal year 26-27. And then the other thing I wanted to note is that YOLO TD's fiscal year 23-24 budget, they identified a potential funding gap on their end. They believed that they projected a funding gap of 3 million for fiscal year 24-25 and increasing to 6 million in fiscal years 25-26 and beyond annually. We have not received an update on the future year 5-year outlook from YOLO TD, so we're still kind of waiting upon that information, but we did want to note it in this presentation as a future consideration. So when we get more information, we'll present that information to City Council for consideration. And so you can go to the next slide. And overall, the city highly subsidizes the on-demand rideshare program. Our typical cost of the program when we're considering the contract with VIA plus our staff time divided by our estimated ridership means that like a ride costs the city typically around $15. Our fares are only $3.50, and then our VIA pass is even more discounted when we provide up to 28 rides for $15 for 7 days. And then I'd like to note that also approximately 25% of our weekly active riders purchase hold a Via Pass, and then 45% of our weekly rides are taken using Via Pass. So a lot of our rides are those kind of low fare rides because they're using the Via Pass. And again, this information was shared, I know, back in November. I'm just reiterating it so that it's kind of fresh on your mind. So the next couple slides, again, I went over back in November, but I think it's important to talk about this in the grand scheme of service parameters and potential changes. So we went over some peer on-demand rideshare services throughout the country. So one of them is Arlington, Texas. So Arlington, actually, one can argue who created the on-demand transportation rideshare program first, but Arlington started their program around the same time as us. Their current hours of operation is Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So compared to our hours of operation, they actually end earlier. On weekdays, we have our service till 11 p.m., on Saturdays also until 11 p.m., and then on Sundays, they don't have service at all. Their fares are a distance-based fare based on distance traveled, so their fares range from $3 to $5, except for at their transit station, which they offer a $3 flat fare because they want to encourage first and last mile gap closures and encourage multimodal trips taken. So otherwise, trips taken on their service is based on their distance traveled. And their on-demand or their frequent rider program, their fare is actually $25. The city's ride Via Pass is $15 under the same conditions, 7-day ride, 7 days of riding for 4 rides a day. And then they also offer a 30-day pass subscription, so 4 rides a day for 30 days. And that program that they have is $80 for that 30-day ride pass. They also kind of try to keep similar parameters to us, so their average wait time is aimed to be between 12 to 15 minutes. Their cost of operations is approximately $11 million annually, and they're funded by fare revenue reinvestment, local funds, and Federal Transit Administration funding. They were able to secure a grant for the program, so some of their program is supported by that. In comparison to City of West Sacramento's service, their service size is, their city size, I guess, is 99.62 square miles. The City of West Sacramento is only 22 square miles. And they have a population of 393,000 folks, whereas the City of West Sacramento has an approximate population of like 55,000. Another thing to note about the Arlington, Texas service is that they're quite different from the City of West Sac in the sense that they have no other transit service provider in their region. They purposely have never decided for having a public transit provider and felt that the city's operations or services could support the public transit needs, and that's why they launched their on-demand rideshare program. Okay, next slide, slide 11. Another one we shared last time was the Cupertino service. So this service operates Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Saturdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then they also don't have a Sunday service. Their fares are similar, again, to City of West Sacramento, so $3.50 a ride with an additional rider being $1 extra. And then they have discounted riders at $1.75. And their discounted riders are comprised of seniors, students, persons with disabilities, and low-income riders. Their wait time in service parameters are similar to how the city operates. They target a wait time of 12 to 15 minutes. And for fiscal year 23-24, they had a $3.2 million contract, and this would increased to 5.8 million in fiscal year 26-27 because the program was seeing some expansions. The Cupertino service received a federal funding grant from TERSEP, I believe. And they were going to expand their program into Santa Clara as well. So that's why you see that significant couple $1 million increase in their service, because they kind of double their service parameter, service area size. And so to the next slide, we're going to switch over onto our on-demand rideshare survey. So that information that I just provided you was just to provide a bit of context of where we last left off in November 2023, understanding like where we are with our budget, the fact that our estimated TDA, like remaining TDA funding for city use is approximately 2.19 million. Our estimated contract cost is about 3.2 million. So as you see, there's kind of a $800,000 gap. And then I wanted to also provide some context on the prior on-demand rideshare payer partners that we see and how they operate their service. And so when we discussed with TMI Commission last November, we went over putting out the RFP, which we did, and now that we have the estimated costs for the fiscal year 24-25 budget, at the same time, we also put out a survey for the public. So this survey was promoted on social media, at flyers, at community destinations such as the library, the community center. We handed it out to our partners to distribute further. And then they were also promoted on the VIA app. So if you open the app, it notified you that there's a survey out and you should complete it. Through the survey, we received 211 responses. The survey results are included as attachment 3 to your agenda report. And I will go over a few stats that we got from the survey. We've received 95% of the 211 responses were respondents that identified as year-round local residents. 68% of respondents have taken a ride in the last 30 days. This doesn't mean that the other 32% haven't taken VIA. It just means in the last 30 days, 68% of respondents noted that they have taken VIA. And then overall, the first few questions of the survey just asked about if they would pay more, like how they felt about the walking distance and the wait time. And overall, those first few questions, the respondents were generally aligned with the current services. Wait time of about 15 minutes, the walking distance of under 500 feet, and the fare prices of $3.50 for a single fare. If you go to the next slide, slide 12, this is one of the questions I wanted to pull out. So question number 6, if the target estimated wait time from ride request to pickup is 10 minutes, how much more would you be willing to pay? So our current estimated wait time is 15 minutes. If we just add up all the folks who are willing to pay anything at all for a quicker pickup time, 62% of respondents indicated that they would pay more, and 38% of respondents indicated that they were not willing to pay at all. And then if you go to the next slide, for question 7, we asked, would you support a fixed fare based on the distance traveled? So this is kind of like the what Arlington has switched to. So for example, if you traveled less than 3 miles, your fare would be $3.50. If you traveled 3 to 5 miles, your fare would be $4.50, and 5 miles plus $5.50. And so if you see the overall results on the right, it's pretty evenly split. But when we looked at the data with more with cross tabulations and everything, we found that more frequent riders, so folks that took 5 rides a day or more than 5 rides a day in the last 30 days, were less supportive of a fixed fare base, a fare based on like distance traveled. So with the more frequent riders, only 37% were supportive of a fare based on distance traveled. And even when I go up to even more frequent riders, like 20 plus rides in the last month, that number stays about the same. So the next slide, we go to question 10. How should the city manage increasing costs for the on-demand rideshare service? And this is just the screenshot to your right of the survey results is just the weighted average of all the scores for, or the weighted average of how everyone ranked theirs, all the different options. Overall, I would say just looking at this, and if you go to the attachment 3 and want to see the breakdown of how many people voted for each rank, you could just overall tell that folks are receptive to changes to the on-demand rideshare program. Let me double check my numbers so I'm not telling you a wrong number. So when we look at how many folks selected keeping the rideshare program completely the same, sorry, this is loading longer than I thought it would. Okay, here we go. So if we looked at the percentage of folks who wanted to keep the on-demand rideshare program exactly the same and not change anything about it, only 21% of folks selected that as their first option. And then we also just overall generally know that people do not want to end the on-demand rideshare program. 87% of all respondents selected that as their last choice of how to deal with the increasing cost of the program and how to manage the program moving forward. So with that in mind and understanding a little bit of the funding gap we might see in this upcoming fiscal year, but also noting that we only have, we're using up all our reserves for fiscal year 24-25 and therefore have no reserves and will only rely on the allocations given in the future years, as well as some information on how other other agencies run their program, as well as kind of a high-level summary of some of our survey results. We wanted to present some options for some actions for TMI Commission to consider under a potential reduced operation scenario. We aren't going to go too much into budget tonight because budget is a conversation that City Council ultimately decides on. But tonight we do want to go a bit into the service changes that TMI Commission believes should or would like to provide feedback on so that we can share that information with City Council. So a couple things that we share in this slide right here, I'll explain each one of them. So the first one, activating required transit mode choice. So that means that if you are a current VIA rider and you turn on your VIA app and try to book a ride, you will see that in the past few months, we've added this feature where it tells you that you could take a bus instead, or there's an upcoming bus, right? Right now, we don't force anyone to take the bus. It's just there. And maybe it makes more sense for your route or timing, or maybe it's coming right away anyways, and it's $1 cheaper to go on Yellow Bus than it is on VIA. But activating required transit mode choice means that we would activate pushing folks to the bus if the bus is coming. So if their trip makes sense with a YOLO bus ride, a transit ride, they wouldn't be allowed to book a VIA ride. They would be directed to go and book a YOLO bus ride instead. They can click through the buttons and it'll take them to like the routes, or they can pay the fares on YOLO bus. So that's one option. And I'd like to note that all these options aren't necessarily independent of each other. They actually more or less might be combined to create a reasonable service change. So that's one action that we can consider. Another action is reducing vehicle hours alone. So if we were just to reduce vehicle hours without changing anything else and say, hey, this is how much money we have available and we can only, supply this many hours with VIA using this budget, that just means that the rest of the service, you'll see potential increased waiting times for riders, or even like lack of seats available, because there might be to have a demand when we don't have enough service hours, vehicle hours on the road. Another option is to cut low demand hours of operation. So this means we take a look at what hours are on Monday to Friday between 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., Saturdays 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., and then Sundays 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. What hours do we have very low ridership, and where are we spending, where can we cut back on those hours because the demand isn't that high at those times? Another option is to look at fare modifications. So this one's pretty easy to grasp, like increasing our single fares, increasing our VIA pass, potentially implementing a fixed fare based on distance traveled, or changing up and increasing or even removing our VIA pass. So those are all just different options of how to approach fare modifications. And then another option is to reduce service area. So we currently provide service in the whole corner-to-corner, whole city. There are areas of the city where rides are high cost for VIA to provide, because there aren't many folks living out there. You can't really couple that ride with another rider, and they're going kind of out of the way in order to pick up that rider or drop them off. So we could take a look at the service area and decide if there are areas we would like to cut service. So I'll go over a bit more examples of what some of these actions can do and how it will affect the service. But overall, while you're listening to the next few slides, I want you to think, what service parameters would you consider adjusting if necessary, so that we can share that information back with the City Council. So if we go to the next slide, slide 17 on hours of operations modifications. This looks at, on the left-hand side, this is let's run the service with just less van hours and just cut number of van hours to hit a certain amount. So that's what the left side means. And so if we were to cut the van hours to meet a $400,000 reduction in the budget, the proposed budget of $3.2 million. So say that $3.2 million budget is now $2.8 million for the fiscal year. If we could only pay enough pay $2.8 million dollars worth of service, how will that affect the ridership? And we would turn on mode choice in these scenarios, and the mode choice where it forces riders to go on to YOLO bus if it makes sense with their trips. We estimate that, VIA estimates that about 5% of ridership would be diverted to YOLO bus. And that's still doesn't handle all of our like demand, because we still, when we reduce our overall like budget by some, or the vehicle van hours by some, you still see that the wait time as compared to today increases. So under a $2.8 million like max budget for operating on-demand service, we anticipate that the average wait time would increase 4 to 5 minutes. So right now it's like typically averaging around 15 minutes of wait time. So say 20 minutes now. And then the seat unavailable rate would increase to about a couple percent. Right now we're under 5% at seat unavailable. It'll increase to 5 to 7%. If you go a bit further and say, hey, we want to cut our complete like budget by $800,000, and so with a $3.2 million contract, comparing to like the full operations, this would be a $2.4 million contract. So however many vehicle hours we can pay, supply with $2.4 million, right? And under that scenario, again, we're activating remote choice to help with some of that demand. But then we see that average wait time now increases to additional 7 to 10 minutes. So about a 25-minute average estimated pickup time, right? And then seat unavailable increases 10%. On the right-hand side, you see an option of a simulation if we were to cut service hours to reduce the number of van hours on the road. So if we cut Monday to Friday, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., that would provide an annual savings of $318,000. If you were to cut 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then 7 p.m. to 11 p.m., you can potentially see a savings of $563,000. And then if you were to consider, so those are two options for just the weekday service. But if you were to look at the weekend service and look at Saturday service, if you were to cut 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., VIA estimates a savings of $28,000 annually. And then for Sunday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., it would save only $34,000 annually. And this is partially because we kind of already manage our demand with the amount of vehicles out there, so we try to line it up. So that's why already on Saturday and Sunday, we're not putting many vans out on the road. So even if we were to cut the service on Saturday and Sunday, that's only cutting off like, 2 vans maybe at those hours. So that's why you see like such different numbers. Okay. So the next slide, we get into a scenario if we were to consider a changing up the fares. So if we look at the left-hand side, if we were to consider increasing the flat pricing, so the $350 that we currently have, keep it the same, don't like change anything else, but just increase the cost to $4.25 or $5, you do see that there would be impacts on, because riders may be less motivated to take VIA when there's a higher cost to their ride. This assumes like no changes to the VIA Pass ridership, but of course the VIA Pass itself would increase in cost. And under this scenario, VIA is estimating that the weekly ridership may decrease 3 to 5%. So that helps a bit with the demand, and our fare box under the scenario kind of increases by about $1,000 to $2,000 weekly. So that's an option where if we increase the flat fare, the single fare, it may help with our demand a little bit, but 5%, even when you're looking at the reducing the vehicle hours, isn't enough to, like, there's still impacts on the rest of demand unless you fund the full service kind of thing. And then the scenario to the right with adjusting fares is to look at a distance-based fare. So this will help the city recoup costs more for those high-cost fares that are kind of further out that aren't shared. And under this scenario where the fare would be like, say, $4 starting, and then for whatever distance, if it were under a certain distance, it's just $4. But once it reaches a certain distance, it starts increasing, and it increases up to a max of $10. Under this scenario, VIA estimates a weekly ridership decrease of 11%, possible fare box increase of 2,700 weekly. So these are just scenarios where we kind of ran a few initial numbers to give you an idea of like how ridership might be impacted if we were to consider these options. Obviously, we can consider different numbers, we can consider different options, but just wanted to put some like numbers or impact on ridership out there for you to kind of be able to wrap your head around. So if we go to the next slide, on a potential via pass fare modification. So if we were to increase the price of via pass, it's potentially could decrease the fare box revenue because it could decrease the weekly ridership. So I think this option considers a via pass in price between $16 to $20. So just increasing it about $5 maybe. So this is just, again, for you to consider that it could help a little bit with the demand, because if we increase the price of via pass, it reduces the weekly ridership a bit. Again, if we choose to increase it more, say we chose $25, like how Arlington has their weekly VIA pass, we can run that scenario with VIA and kind of get another number of how ridership might be impacted. But this is just under a scenario if it were increased to like $20. And then if you go to the next slide, this comes back to before I gave the scenario examples and actions to consider under reduced operations, and reiterating the conversation we want to have tonight of what service parameters would TMI Commission want to consider adjusting if necessary, so that we can provide this information to the City Council. And then before we get into that discussion, I'd like to go to the next slide that talks about next steps a little bit. Slide 21. Next steps for this program would be that we reconcile and update the budgets after we receive YOLO-TD's final budgets, and then we kind of reconcile VIA's budget with the rollover and the remaining amount. In the agenda report, we talk about a Clean Air Funds grant that we applied for to expand the on-demand rideshare program into downtown Sacramento. That service, we executed the MOU on May 2nd. So as such, we went after a Clean Air Funds grant to support that expansion. We can bring back that item to City Council for further discussion on how it impacts the budget, because we didn't necessarily include it in the $3.2 million proposed budget. So the option is either we can put more money into the program if we want to try to maintain service parameters, or we can keep the budget at what was proposed, because we're not really sure what the impacts or what the ridership will be in downtown Sacramento. So we can use this chance to see how far it extends our current budget and how it impacts the rest of our service, and work within the budget that was proposed by VIA. Another thing we'll have, so this is kind of the only time we'll have TMI Commission feedback before we go to City Council on May 15th with this budget workshop. We're presenting similar information, but with more detailed budget discussion, and we'll try to incorporate the TMI feedback for city council consideration. We need to do this at the May 15th meeting because we still need to bring back the contract award to city council. Our contract with VIA ends on June 30th. So we need June to be able to bring back a contract award to city council. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, and we can get back to the discussion questions I had posed.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Really appreciate you bringing us to our attention again. And good to see all these options. Commissioners, there's a discussion prompt. Who would like to start us off?
I think I would really say really thank you for really providing that service. And I think even last time we were really excited about the opportunities that you provide to our fellow citizens, and I think it's really just great to see that. Also really kind of the potential solutions you bring forward, and so I'm looking forward to some discussions. One thing that maybe the first point I want to point out for this activating required transit mode, I see that as a little bit problematic, considering that it might not work. So let's say I'm waiting for my VIA and it tells me there's a bus to catch and I need to go and catch the bus instead, and then the bus never shows up. I think you might lose some of your customers that. So I feel like maybe having that as a suggestion for the rider instead of having that as a mandatory option, and you basically kick them out as you're not desired, you're not liked here, go somewhere else. So I think that might just be perceived as not too positive. So that was my kind of point where I would be afraid of actually activating that, and not really just something that is an interaction between VIA and the customer, but you also basically would rely really on that technology to work really, really well. And again, if that person basically is stranded in the middle of the night or having to go somewhere and being told by VIA that, sorry, go somewhere else, and then they can't get there, I think that would not be in anyone's interest.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that in saying that the suggestion of taking the bus, I think, is a wonderful idea, and I think that's a great thing that's been added to this service. So thank you very much for that. I had a question about reducing vehicle hours, or sort of the outlying hours, sort of early morning and late night. I did notice that in the cities that you compared this to, they tended to drop their service around 9 p.m., whereas ours tends to go towards 11 or so. In those times that are being considered to be dropped, I believe it was around 7 a.m. to 9 and 9 to 11 or so. Is there any sort of recording of what those outlier trips, what the purpose of those trips are for? If it's, recreation, or if it's work, people getting home from work or anything? I mean, are those... Personally, I think that cutting the outlier times may be one of the front runner best things to do to help the budgetary issues. But I do have a bit of a fear that, okay, if there's a considerable amount of riders that are using it for very important things in their life, then that might be just, I don't know, cutting off in ways that really is restrictive for the residents. I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, unfortunately, we wouldn't have information by the hour level because it's anonymized data, and the only thing we do know about the rides we see is the location, like pickup and drop off location, and it's hard to make assumptions regarding that. And we do surveys of what people take rides for, but we don't tie that to a time of day.
Yeah. Have there been other, is this the sole survey that we have for public opinion? The one with 211 responses? As of recently?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a question about fare structure. Have we considered having a single fare and then a daily pass for up to 4 rides, and then a weekly pass, and then a monthly pass?
We can consider that. The survey responses did indicate that folks were open to different pass options. And it is something that we could do with the service. But then the question would be, what would we set those other pass prices to?
The rate.
Mhm.
I have a few more songs, but
Well, I wanted to say something about the, what was it that you called it? Where you have to take the bus?
Oh, the activating mode, required mode choice.
Yes, when I've used VIA, I haven't used it recently, but when I've used it, I have appreciated when I have tried to order a ride that it has given me the suggestion to use Yellow Bus, because, you know, sometimes it's just easier to walk to the corner and get on the bus instead of just waiting for the VIA to come. I don't think that I would really like to have that choice taken away from me. To be forced to use a mode of transit, because I think in terms of giving people transportation options, the point is to make sure that they have the option, not take the choice from them.
Can I add one comment to that? I've also seen the bus option. I think that's a great idea. I'm glad you're integrating the bus and the VIA. I think that's fantastic. One thing I think that would help people make an informed choice would be if the buses had a transponder on them. If you could see that you're being asked to take the bus and you look on your VIA app and you can see that the bus is where it is and where it's going to, and maybe the bus stop's on there, like that'd be great, because, you know, somebody said, what if the bus never comes? Well, if you can see that the bus is driving down the street and it's 5 minutes away and you can see the little bus icon moving down the street.
At the same time, when
Yeah,
you're
then you
looking
might
at
be
the-
like, yeah, I'm gonna take the bus. And also, like, maybe it directs you. Maybe there's a big red dot that says, here's the bus station you have to walk to, and it's a 2-minute walk. Like, if you could see that the bus was, you know, 5 minutes away and moving, and the bus station was a 2-minute walk in the north direction, I would love that. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, because that has to do with the intermodality, because,
Yeah.
you know, it's difficult sometimes to have to toggle between VIA and then the My Ride app.
Yeah.
Especially for people who are new here or visiting, especially the attractions close to City Hall and the stadium. Is this an appropriate time to talk about the other survey that had to do with the drivers?
Oh, yes, you can speak about that.
I just had a question about one thing that concerned me was it was driver safety. I think that there were 50% of the I have to look again, but there was a significant amount in my mind of drivers who did not feel safe. Maybe, I hope I'm not reading that wrong. Let me pull up the report.
Drivers didn't feel safe, or the people didn't feel safe?
There was an instance in which I think I recall reading where there were, according to the results, some drivers who had an experience feeling unsafe.
We have a couple questions like that. So there's like question 7 is, has a VIA passenger ever made you feel uncomfortable? Question 8 is, has the VIA app ever directed you to drive unsafely? Question 9 is, has the VIA app ever made you feel like you had to drive too fast? Question 10 is, does the VIA app ever make you feel like you have to make an unsafe maneuver? Which that one does have a significant high response on yes. So maybe you were looking at that one?
Yeah, that concerns me. I'm looking at a few of them because I'll take the one question 4 first. Do you feel safe driving with VIA passengers? Hold on. No, that wasn't the right. Has a VIA passenger ever made you feel unsafe? I thought that would be majority no. The majority of the drivers said yes at 55%, and 44% said no. So what are we doing to make sure that our the majority of our drivers feel safe when they're conveying riders.
At this current stage, we allow drivers to request and put passengers in the back before they're allowed to sit in the front. I think that we still don't let like a passenger sit in the front if there's empty seats in the back. That was a change we made during COVID just for spacing reasons and the pandemic. But I don't think that we've changed that where it's at first try to place all passengers in the back. And this has been something that's been brought up to us where I think sometimes at later evenings, like they'll lock the passenger door so that they can only enter in the back.
Were there any examples of how passengers made drivers feel unsafe?
Sometimes we receive feedback from and complaints from the public directly to the city about an unsafe situation. We do investigate those once we get that information, we check in with our VIA project managers on the side, and they do a thorough investigation of that. Typically, it involves suspending the driver while they do the investigation. In some instances, it has resulted in the disaffiliation with a driver so that they're no longer allowed to drive on the VIA app. But in other situations, it has where a driver has felt unsafe with passengers, it has also meant that we have not allowed those riders to use their account to book via rides anymore. It's a two-way street kind of thing. It is something that sometimes in the past we've heard a lot about. It's kind of an investigation on what the rider said and the driver said. We've been talking to VIA about the option of what can be modified for this, or what can help deal with this issue that we get pulled into. And they have looked into installing dash cams so that we can get feed of the rides, and that therefore hopefully having a camera feed will deter some unwanted behaviors. That is an additional cost that we're working through. So we're still kind of working through the budget, but high level, I don't think it costs significantly higher on an annual level.
There's another safety issue that I wanted to address. They're questions 8, 9, and 10. Has the VIA ever directed you to drive unsafely? Does VIA's app ever make you feel like you have to drive too fast? 10, does VIA's app ever make you feel like you have to make an unsafe maneuver? Now, I don't own a vehicle. I do have a driver's license. I rarely drive. When I do need to drive, I use Zipcar or I rent a car. I'm mostly a pedestrian or I use public transit. Now, I'm not a transportation or a code enforcement officer, but there have been some experiences, some moments from my experience where I have, from my judgment, seen a driver do a maneuver that was possibly reckless or dangerous, where they may have turned a little bit too sharply or narrowly, or quite frankly, been driving a little bit too fast. Now, I wasn't standing there with a speedometer, but when I saw this, taking number 10, the first question I have is, how would the app ever make a driver feel like they have to make an unsafe maneuver? Is it because of the time, the head times?
I don't think so. I would think that it's mostly based on, I'm sure the technology is tied to Google Maps or another mapping software. So it's taking that information of telling people where to do U-turns, or, and then also the stop locations that we have are determined and by staff. We went through an effort, I think last year, where we tried to consolidate spots that we knew our more vulnerable riders were at. So if it was a location near a dialysis center, a health center, a senior center, we try to batch all of the stops in that vicinity to the front of that building to assist with like safety issues. So it might be a little bit of the software itself, because it's tied to telling one how to drive and where to do U-turns. That's not necessarily like up to date with possibly the city's signage on where they can do a U-turn or whatever type of maneuver they're trying to do. Or it could be with, and this is all speculation, but it also could be with the stop locations that are in the service itself. Staff has, again, taken a look at that in the last year, but it is something that we try to get involved with if we hear if there are any unsafe maneuvers. We do encourage people to let us know, because we only know as much as we can only deal with as much as we hear about the service. So it is something where we can dig a bit deeper, given that we've received these survey results, and speak with the drivers a bit more on like what exactly unsafe maneuvers have they felt the VIA app has directed them to make.
Going back to drivers feeling unsafe with passengers or passengers feeling unsafe with drivers, is there an ability to put a note on, like, could I as a passenger put a note about like maybe kind of like a review about that driver, and then vice versa, they can do that about?
I think the app currently allows you to review your ride after each and every ride. So you can rate it and I think put in any notes you want to put in. I don't believe there's an option for the drivers to rate the passengers, though.
Okay, so maybe that could be something.
I do want to say, though, that it is common for drivers to report back to the manager over at VIA who's handling the drivers. Correct me, Stephanie, the name of that, the dispatcher.
Mm-hmm.
So they will report when there's an incident of a resident, perhaps being intoxicated or making them feel uncomfortable, saying something inappropriate. We do hear about that. So I don't believe, it's not like Uber or Lyft where, I can rate this resident and say whether or not I want to pick them up in the future. It's more of, let us know if there's something inappropriate going on, and, that gets handled internally by VIA. If it happens again, then the city gets involved.
Yeah, and like I noted a bit earlier, we have had instances where it elevated to the level where we disaffiliate the account of a rider, and therefore that account cannot take a ride. It's kind of, one can make an account with any email, any cell phone number and credit card, and it's I would say it's a bit difficult to handle that kind of situation.
So I know that we're mainly talking about how the future of this program and whether it's going to be financially viable and kind of what the future of it is. That's in questions with the future projections of the budgeting for it. With things, I like the next steps thing you have here in considering what may be changing with this program with the A's, coming for the new games. Presumably, we're going to get a lot more people. We're going to get a lot more people coming from SAC to West SAC here, and for that reason, I'm kind of hesitant to drop the late night hours of the VIA service. Has city staff identified that with these things that some of these budget issues may go away with just increased ridership, just based on all this new service and new interest in our city.
I would hesitate to say because with the new demand brings the need for more vehicle hours.
Yeah.
So it's, and as I presented in one of the early slides of the cost per ride, we highly subsidize the program already because the cost to operate like one ride is about $15 and our fares are only $3.50.
So just more people using VIA may not necessarily be
No.
the solution or anything. Okay.
I have a crazy idea. It's sort of similar to your second proposal of distance-based fares, but I would say rather than have it be distance-based, perhaps we start to implement a high-value time or target kind of pricing. And what I mean by that is if we're considering dropping the 11 o'clock at night service, why don't we just make that more expensive? That would be one option. Like, you know, if people are out, if it's costing the city a lot of money, you know, make the price higher at sort of off-peak hours. The other option potentially is, let's, you know, I keep thinking about, I know we keep bringing this up, going across the bridge and into Sacramento. But what if the cost of a ride into Sacramento was $15? Like, what if it was actually kind of expensive? And then additional riders on your same ticket would maybe only be $2 per each additional rider. And so all of a sudden, your VIA is now bringing in $20 for that one ride, some kind of surge pricing. Or maybe you limit it to times when it's not super busy, like if there's a huge backup on the I Street Bridge, then you don't do it. And I would say that you would want to limit your service to only one or two targets. You would maybe want to go to 7th and Capitol, where there's a light rail connection. And maybe you would also go to, you know, the Amtrak station. But you might have the app not allow that if there's a huge traffic jam so that you don't get stuck over there. But I mean, when you think about it, like an Uber going across the bridge is $20. So, you know, I think if somebody could pay $15 and get across the bridge, and then maybe additional riders were $5 each or something, or $3 each, all of a sudden you potentially are using that sort of high value target to subsidize the entire network. And I think this could work for something, we're talking about the Oakland A's, right? Folks that are going to a baseball game, maybe they don't want to drive and park. Maybe parking is really expensive at the ballpark. Maybe they would rather take an Uber or take light rail, and so they don't have to drive at all because maybe they've been drinking. Who knows? But, you know, I think there could be a market for folks that want to take light rail, then somehow get into West Sacramento, and then go to the baseball game. I would also say the other demographic that I think could be very interested in this pricing structure would be state workers. State workers are being asked to come back in the office 2 days a week. Let's say somebody comes in 10 days a month. That's not a lot, but we get some state workers get a $300 a month transit subsidy. They cannot use that for parking. They cannot drive into the city, pay for parking, and get that subsidized. But they can use that for transit. And so, you know, if somebody were to live in West Sacramento or, you know, and want to go downtown to 7th and Capitol, and they're paying $15 a ride, times twice a day, times 10 days a month, that's $300 right there. And they are not paying for it. The state's paying for it. The reverse of that would be somebody that's coming in on light rail, potentially, you know, there's a CDFW wildlife, there's a Department of Fish and Wildlife office out by IKEA somewhere out that way. You know, if they're coming in on light rail from Folsom, from some other place, they don't have an option to get to work without driving right now. But if VIA were available from, say, a light rail stations, again, 7th and Capitol, it could bring them to their place of work. They might not be that price sensitive because they're getting it subsidized. And you could even open it up. You could even have your app say, let's say there's somebody who can't afford it. Say somebody works across the bridge or is across the bridge and wants to get to West Sac, and they can't afford the $15. There could be a mode where, hey, there's a VIA going across the bridge, and your app lets you know, hey, there's an opportunity to hop on for $5. Do you want to take it? And so somebody who maybe is price sensitive but has more time could like open up their app and say, alert me when there's an option to go across the bridge from my general location, from my neighborhood. You know, so somebody could be hanging out, waiting for an hour, like thinking like somebody's going to take a VIA, and it goes across the bridge, and you know somebody else is paying $15 because they ordered the ride, but maybe the second person's only paying $5 because they're waiting for a ride that's already happening. Like, you could have some sort of creative price surge scheme like that and potentially subsidize it. That's my idea. I'll stop. I'm happy to lay that out in an email if you want to hear more about it, but.
I like that idea because I live here in West Sac and work at Golden One Center and typically take Golden YOLO bus. There have been times where I've taken Via to the bridge and walked, and I have often wondered what is the regulatory and practical hurdle that we would need to get over just to drive over that bridge. Is it that, I mean, I guess one hurdle would have to be where would the pickup and drop off spot be, right?
Only-
Because
So-
it's how.
Only have a couple spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We do have an MOU executed with YOLO TD and SAC-RT for us to do a pilot into downtown Sacramento, and that's why I applied for the Clean Air funds. The reason why it's taken so long to get to this point is because there are transit district boundaries that are defined, and there are rules about who can go into whose transit boundaries. Because we have this MOU executed, we have the agreement of SAC-RT and YOLO TD that we can enter our VIA service into downtown Sacramento.
You can.
Mhm.
So we
Just
can
to-
do
That's
it.
exciting.
Just to add to that, though, there are other layers. So there's sensitivity as to how much service are we taking away from YTD potentially. And so the sensitivity from YTD is that they want us to be providing on a monthly basis what our ridership figures are and compare them to YTD's ridership to make sure that we're not taking away from their ridership. Now, from a transit perspective from ours, we just want to get people where they want to go, inexpensively and effectively. But there are other considerations that have to be made. One of those requirements is that SAC-RT cannot come over here.
Yeah.
So that, even though they operate Smart Ride with VIA, and we have West Sacramento On Demand with VIA, at this time, we have to have a separation between that simply because of the district boundaries. This is something that eventually is going to have to be overcome. SAC-RT will be coming over here with light rail.
Right.
We do have an MOU executed that says that they will be able to bring light rail service. But bus service is a completely different animal because it's in direct conflict with YTD's YOLO bus service. So these things have taken time because of the political sensitivities that surround that. And so staff has been very sensitive with it and have been actively involved in negotiations for some time. And I'm very thankful that we have gotten to this agreement with YTD and SAC-RT for this 1-year pilot. So that was the other boundary that we had to have, is this is a 1-year pilot only, such that we can review the data and see exactly what the effect is on our partner transit district as well.
Yeah, one thing I was wondering is if the customers that want to go across the bridge are price insensitive and there's high demand, one thing you could build into the prices is some sort of rider fee back to YOLO bus, whatever it costs to ride YOLO bus. It's not a lot. I know it's not a lot, but you could kick back $3, $6, whatever it is that the rider would have paid to YOLO bus instead. I mean, I don't know what the demand is. There might be no demand, but I suspect that there's demand and that people, are willing to pay for the service. Again, an Uber, I just checked, an Uber from here to 7th and Capitol is $20 right now, and that doesn't include the tips. So, I think that somebody would be willing to pay $15, and if they had 3 friends, then they might be willing to pay $20 or $25, and especially if it can get them, where they want to go reliably, or they might just take an Uber. I don't know. But if I'm paying $15 and then somebody else is waiting for the app to ping them and tell them that there's they're willing to pay $5, you could end up filling up a VIA with 5 or 6 people, and all of a sudden you just got $40 in your app because a bunch of people jumped on or something like that. It could work, or maybe it'd be a disaster and a failure. So
That's why it's a pilot.
yeah,
why
you
it's a
could end it
pilot.
at any time if you're like, this is not working at all. I mean, you find out, you get some data, you figure out what the demand is.
What's the price comparison to Smart Ride?
I forget. Do you know?
That's maybe something to look at, you know, if maybe they're charging like $1 more, maybe it makes sense for us. I'm kind of against that. I personally, I think that the service hours is kind of the most obvious spot to look at for, you know, saving money. It's in that survey that was the top response that people agreed with. Also, I mean, I know I was thinking the same thing about the Oakland A's coming. Like, oh man, what a loss of that late night hours, those late night hours when A's are here. But why couldn't you just bring it back temporarily on A's night? You know, like, why does it have to be, oh, we're stuck with these hours for all this time just because the A's are going to come, you know? It could be a temporary hour change, particularly when they're here. Because, yeah, the numbers are showing that's where you can really save some money, is cutting those hours that are not as highly used and are kind of not normal to offer when compared to other programs, those very early, very late. And then those weekend times are not going to save as much, but also it sounds like it's not impacting people as much. And that's why it's not much, because there's just less people using those hours, so there's less vans out. So I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of liking that option that you guys have, cut service hours to reduce van hours.
So actually, I had a couple of things that I wanted to say here for consideration, I think, because I think the questions, specifically 7 and 10, I think they're a little problematic. And it goes back to the question 7, which is, you know, increasing fare. So I would assume if you get asked that question, do you want to pay more for service that you're actually receiving right now? Only few people would say, oh, absolutely, I'm gonna pay more. If you basically then look at the other options, reducing hours where you can actually book that, is most likely that's not gonna impact me. So I would assume immediately the other people basically will not provide or get that offer anymore. So I think there's a little bit of a bias how we can actually look at the data and how we can actually then also explain how reducing service hours is basically on the top. And I think the other thing I think we should think about it is, who do we want to serve? Do we want to serve people who are going to the baseball game, or do we want to serve people who don't have another option to go to work outside of the core hours? So I think that might shape the whole discussion a little bit. And I think it might be where we could then bring more service when there are basically big events in town. But I think cutting away or taking away these special hours that we are actually providing here, which are not provided in other cities, I think this is actually our strength. This is great to have the possibility for people to getting around late at night, on the weekends. There might be some problems with, you know, some incidences where maybe the passengers are not behaving. But on the other side, it means like we are not having these people drive. And so I think there is actually a value of having these off hours provided. And again, I think it goes back to also this question is, if you drive longer, you have to pay more, then immediately, if I know I have to drive longer distances, I would know that would impact me immediately. So I would think I'm more biased to say, no, I'm not gonna want to pay more for the service. So I think these are the things when you look at these numbers, or when the City Council is looking at the survey, maybe that's also something to consider. And then if you look at also the results, the top ranking, yeah, we have reducing hours demand as the top, but I think it's really kind of also driven by that, oh, and most likely not gonna affect me. But then if you look at, you know, raising fares is not so much lower, it's ranked basically on the third position. So it's actually not that far behind. And then increasing targeted wait times, I think that's, yeah, sure, why not increasing that? So I just believe that reducing service hours, I would be careful about that, because I think, really personally think that this is the strength of our program. And again, it's like who's benefiting from that? People who maybe don't have a car, who need to go somewhere, go to the hospital, or, you know, just don't have another opportunity. And so I think, and you guys will have all the statistics on that as well, meaning what other services would be available, buses or. So I think that is something I would encourage the city to look at.
Maybe there could be another survey done, providing like different blocks of hours that could potentially be cut, and seeing, you know, how people are feeling about potentially cutting those. Like maybe just getting a little more specific with people about what could be cut to, you know, deal with the issue of people maybe thinking it won't affect them. Maybe if there's like a way for people to vote on what would be cut, then, you know, like rank it, then we could really see what people would be comfortable with losing as far as service hours go. And I hear the point that, you know, that's a special thing about what we have here is these, you know, longer service hours. But you also think about like Arlington, Texas, this is their only transportation service. They don't have a bus option or anything. I mean, this is really all they offer, and they have way less service hours than us. We have multiple transportation options. We have the bus, which is, you know, less convenient. It does take longer. I definitely know that it takes me 45 minutes to get to my office on the bus, 30 minutes biking, 10-minute drive. So that's in Sacramento. But anyways, you know, the bus, but it is a way to get around. Whereas, you know, comparing to Arlington, Texas, who has a lot less service hours, they don't have any other way as far as transportation, and they still have way less service hours. It's just, I mean, if we're going to be risking this program by trying to keep these extensive service hours, I just think that that's unfortunate, because, I mean, we want to have this program last long term, but we have to do something as far as how can we save somewhere to make it so this program can last, have the longevity.
One more little thing, I like the idea that, okay, we suggested that you could take a bus instead of a Via if you're on that app. I don't know if there's any sort of outreach we could do to other apps where, you know, instead of taking their service, you could take Via as well. But I think that I agree with it's rough and not really what you want to do to reduce accessibility. That's definitely consideration. Also like the idea that if we are going to raise fares and the cost of this to the consumer, better to do it on people who are outside of the West Sacramento city bound. So, and to bring, you know, money in from outside of the city into our city programs should always be a priority. So I think that there's some good opportunities there. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I also really like your point that, you know, this is kind of about the survival of this program, and I'd much rather keep the program than not keep it exactly the way it is, because we are going to have to make some sacrifices somewhere, unless there's perhaps more grants available for this. I mean, I don't know if there's more ways to get just a bigger budget through seeking more grants and getting it from other organizations that are. I don't know if we really scrape the bottom of the barrel for money for this program.
So typically, when you're looking at state, federal programs, they're looking for what are we getting out of it. So, for instance, we applied for the air quality funds because we are doing a service pilot. Mm-hmm. We have gotten funds in the past when we've expanded things or moved things, but it's very rare for us to be able to find and get awarded funds for ongoing maintenance of an existing service. We almost never can find those kind of funds. When we do, like I said, it's only because we are able to tie one part of it to another. I'll give you an example. West Capitol needed to be resurfaced. There was nothing that we could do to find any kind of funding that would allow us to repave that roadway for ongoing maintenance. What did we do? We did a road diet. We put in green bike lanes. So what you have to do in order to get regular maintenance dollars or ongoing service dollars is you must provide an additional service or something above and beyond. That is the exact same with this program. So I can give you a very solid assurance that it would be extremely difficult for our staff to be able to find just funds to continue with ongoing maintenance of this program.
All right, well, that was a pretty good discussion, folks. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Chan. We really appreciate it. I think with that, we should end this agenda item and move on to the next one. The next item is an update on the Sacramento Avenue Complete Streets Corridor Improvement Plan, and we have another presentation.
Yes, it'll also be me. So, this second presentation tonight, again, Stephanie Chan, is on the Sacramento Avenue Complete Streets Corridor Improvement Plan, or more publicly known as the SAC Ave Complete Street Plan. So I presented to TMI Commission previously on February on this item, and I just wanted to come back to TMI Commission tonight with the updates to our proposed concepts, because we released our draft plan today, and I just wanted to kind of acknowledge this milestone and kind of give an update to how the minor changes of the material we presented to TMI Commission back in February. So the draft plan is currently out for public comment until June 7th. And with that, I'll just get into the next slide, which again, just a little bit of background. This plan was funded by SACOG's Community Design Program. We authorized a contract with GHD and started the Complete Street Plan in 2022. We were further awarded a Green Means Go grant to study non-transportation infrastructure along the corridor in March of 2023. So then we amended the scope with GHD to include that grant in November of 2023. So the idea was that we can coordinate the underground utility infrastructure needs along the corridor to support infill housing development with the transportation improvements that are coming along the way, so that we don't impact the residents of this area multiple times. Okay, next slide. So the project status is that we're currently in the draft plan. We've wrapped it up and it's out for public comment. And once we get those public comments, we'll wrap that in, respond to them, and bring the final plan for city council adoption. Next slide. So we've done a lot of work and brought this item to TMI Commission previously to talk about the vision and goal setting for this plan. We went over existing conditions, and we went over the proposed strategy and the evaluation and scoring of the strategies during the February meeting. Next slide. Oh, and then the light gray unbolded here are just the items that we're still working on. We still have engagement to do because that's is throughout the project, and we're still getting feedback from the public on the draft plan to incorporate into the final plan. And then we are working on getting the final plan approved shortly after the comment period closes. Next slide on the vision of the Sac Ave Complete Street Plan is that Sac Ave/C Street is a safe, accessible, and enjoyable community asset with active mobility infrastructure and pedestrian-oriented streetscapes that support local and social opportunities. And this is a vision that was brought to TMI Commission and City Council for approval. So just putting it back out there. Next slide, existing conditions. Just wanted to, again, provide a kind of corridor context of what's going on along the corridor. We have the Highway Safety Improvement Program, where we received a federal funded grant to make some safety enhancements along the corridor. So those little red dots you see are the intersections where we're making some safety enhancements to the corridor. We're currently in design of that project, and we'll wrap that up, I think, within this or next year. Otherwise, this map also shows you information of like development along the corridor / potential development along the corridor. So you can see that it incorporates our mobility action plan and where we have identified mobility hubs along this corridor. So in our mobility action plan, we identified a mobility hub at the State Foods supermarket parking lot. And then we also identified a mobility hub along the C Street and 5th Street area, or 3rd Street area, but I don't think it's actually shown in this map, possibly due to the number of techs in that area. Additionally, it shows the EV charging station that the city is working on installing at the Elkhorn Plaza. This project is to put in 2 DCFC fast chargers, EV chargers into that plaza. We anticipate that those EV chargers will be installed by the end of this calendar year. And then other projects we have, of course, as you know, Sacramento Avenue connects over to I Street Bridge, where we have the bridge replacement and the active, the deck conversion project for active transportation. And then beyond all those kind of mobility enhancements that we're making to the corridor, we have a number of like a potential development along the corridor. So along Sac Avenue, a little bit east of Jefferson and Kegel, we've received development proposals in the past at 735 Sacramento Ave and 851 Sacramento Ave, and you can see those are for mixed-use developments along that those currently vacant properties. This is just shared within the plan to show the potential development of these. It's again dependent upon the developer to move forward with these projects. And then there's also some other high-density residential units proposed closer to 5th Street. So next slide, with that in mind, and with the vision, we have a concept that focused on 3 themes that we had received City Council and TMI Commission and the public's feedback on, which involved accessible green corridor, a community streetscape, and multimodal street. And so an accessible green corridor is using landscaping or other methods to provide comfort and aesthetics along the corridor. This community streetscape is making an active lifestyle and like activating the corridor for use beyond just a means of transportation. And then a multimodal street is just making sure that it's making a street that is a space that is for active lifestyles and people who need to walk or bike, or people with all different abilities to be able to utilize that facility. So using those 3 themes, the next slide shows, the next few slides shows the concepts that we have proposed along the corridor between Harbor Boulevard to 5th Street, 3rd Street area, up to Power Bridge Gateway. And this starts at the western area at the Harbor Boulevard intersection. And this concept has kind of been presented to TMI Commission already, but just to highlight on some of the big points, it's proposing a class 4 cycle track that's separated from the vehicular lane of travel with landscaping. It's raised on the sidewalk, adjacent to the sidewalk, raised and delineated that it's separated from the pedestrian path to sidewalk area. You can see a roundabout at the harbor intersection. You'll also notice that there's bus stop enhancements. So if you're along this area near Harbor Boulevard on Sac Ave, you probably know that there's missing sidewalks kind of just west of Sunset. There's just missing sidewalks. There's a little like slab of concrete for where one waits for the bus stop on the north side, but beyond that, like there's just a dirt path up there. So again, this project is focusing on filling in those sidewalk gaps, providing a facility that is a class 4 separated from the high-speed traffic along this roadway. The traffic speeds along this roadway are currently 40 miles per hour. So those are kind of the main concepts along this corridor. If you go to the next slide, it's just very similar. It's just moving along the corridor, moving east, and you'll see the only difference is that at the south side near Yolo Street, you'll see that there is actually a bi-directional bike path on the south side, and that's to allow for a future connection with the Sycamore Trail so that anyone coming out of the Sycamore Trail can go left or right and cross the safe intersections rather than biking in the wrong direction or making a unsafe movement to get to the other side of the street at Yellow Street. And then again, next slide, if you move along the corridor, it kind of stays the same except for you'll get to Jefferson Boulevard, and then now you'll see another roundabout. So the roundabouts really are for traffic calming measures to deal with the upcoming level of service needs and also just safety enhancements along the corridor. We think that they also provide a appropriate gateway to kind of a residential area of our city. It provides an opportunity to kind of make a gateway beyond the Washington district and transition us to more of our local roads. And I say that in the sense of when we initiated this plan, we had 4 themes that we proposed to the public, and one of the themes was a regional connection, that Sac Ave would be a regional connection. And that actually received the lowest amount of support. When we talked about our themes, it received 8% of support from all the people who voted. And so we removed that theme from how we wanted to look at this corridor and what concepts we wanted to provide. And we think that these roundabouts can provide traffic calming, but also a gateway into our local, city-focused corridor. And then if you go to and then another thing I want to actually notate on this segment 3 is that you can see at the top right text, it discusses the mobility hub that's proposed at the State Street's supermarket parking lot that was identified from our mobility action plan. So this Sac Ave Complete Street Plan incorporated that into this streetscaping multimodal effort. And then if you go on to the next slide, this is the area of Sacramento Avenue that starts to get constrained as we move towards C Street. And because of these constraints, you'll notice that the landscaping is a bit reduced as compared to other areas of the plan. And then as you continue east to segment 5, the same thing. As you get onto that curve, we're constrained by the UP Railroad on the bottom, Union Pacific. So that area, you'll see that we've removed the landscaping, but still keep the class 4 separated bike lane on grade with the sidewalk and vertically delineated from the vehicular traffic. And then when you get to segment 6 on the next slide, this actually really incorporates a lot of the efforts from our North 5th Street North 5th Street Connectivity and Complete Street Project. We were awarded a ATP grant last cycle, and this is kind of that whole area. So we plan to incorporate the proposed concepts within the SACAF plan into that project. And if you go to the next slide, slide 14, on the proposed concepts, you'll see that we have some pretty significant intersection changes. The roundabouts at Jefferson and Kegel and Harbor Boulevard. And then at the C and 5th Street, we proposed a protected intersection. These are just measures that we proposed in order to consider benefits in safety, encouraging slower movement, and reducing conflict points. I'll get into this a little bit more on how it affects vehicular traffic in a bit. And then if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to provide, these were shared with you previously, but again, some enhancement opportunities that activate the zone. So when we think about streetscaping and the mobility hub, what can that look like? And our consultant was able to provide some renderings of that on the right side of this slide. And then the next slide also shows another location where we can activate the corridor, and this is at the Elkhorn Plaza area. So again, you'll notice the kind of enhancement opportunities on the bottom two pictures where it shows potentially adding in a sidewalk in the plaza, the grassy area, that's city-owned area, and adding in other elements to kind of make it a area people can stay at rather than just a little grassy point that we're adding EV chargers at. And with the EV chargers, we're hoping that, we can provide a little station where there's our current micromobility, so our e-bikes and e-scooters that we permit Lime and Bird to operate in our city. So that, if you are dropping off your vehicle there for charging for a bit and you do want to run an errand or do something really quick, you can take a little e-scooter over to State Food Supermarket and pick something up. So next slide, this is a preliminary cost estimate of the proposed improvements. This was presented to TMI Commission back in February, but this has an updated number. It's slightly a little bit higher. I think we previously showed like maybe 53 or 52 million with some adjustments to the project and the proposed concepts. We're able to refine the costs a little bit more. And the total cost of the entire quarter would be $56 million. You can see segment 1 and segment 3 are significantly costlier than the other segments, and that's because segment 1 and segment 3 encompass the roundabout concepts. And then next slide. We'll get into evaluation and scoring a little bit. Again, this kind of evaluation and scoring was presented during the February meeting, but we had some updates to these numbers following that meeting, so I wanted to just share those with you really quick. So the next slide, we look at existing conditions for safety, and you see that Sacramento Avenue is actually considered one of our most high-risk corridors. We get a lot of collisions. So the two maps on the right show those collision density maps where we get the most collisions. And then the tables to the left give some more detail on what kind of collisions they are, and where we see fatal and severe collisions. You can see that on the bottom map. FSI is fatal and severe incidences of collisions, and you can see the number of those over the last, I believe this was, actually, I don't want to say the years, but because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but that gives you the fatal and severe collisions along the corridor. And so with the proposed improvements, if you go to the next slides, you can see that we calculated what safety benefits we anticipate with the proposed improvements. So that includes improvements such as high visibility crosswalks and cross bike markings, installing sidewalk, installing the class 5 separated bike lane. And on the map, you can see how much in orange the collision is anticipated to reduce at nighttime. In green, you can see the collision reduction for bike and peds. And then in black, you can see the collision reduction for all modes of transportation. And then if you go to the next slide, slide 21, we also looked at how the improvements closed gaps and removed barriers. So the top map shows where we're missing sidewalks in the top, in the dark purple. And then the bottom shows where there's kind of barriers where people might want to cross, but they can't necessarily, or it might be an unsafe location to cross. So if you go to the next slide, we go into existing bicycle level of traffic stress. And this, again, existing conditions, currently Sacramento Avenue is rated level of traffic stress 3 and 4 along the whole corridor. So level 3 means that, like, pretty much you're an enthusiastic and confident rider to be able to tolerate riding on this road. Like, you prefer to be separated, but you're pretty confident with your riding skills that you're okay with riding along the corridor. And then level of traffic stress 4 means that these are very strong and fearless riders. They ride a bunch, and they're very skilled, and they're able to tolerate like cars passing them at 40 miles per hour. Maybe a very, like right now, as you know, Sac Ave only has one painted line and no buffer, so they're very okay with that. And given that Sac Ave is also one of our truck routes, they're fine with trucks driving right past them. So as you can see, all along the corridor, Sacramento Avenue has a, we expect that the only folks really biking along that corridor are folks that are pretty confident in their riding, or possibly they really just, it's biking or walking is really their only means of transportation, and they have to do this. And it's important to note when you get to the next slide, the level of traffic stress with this project reduces the bicycle level of traffic stress to LTS 1 along the whole corridor. Great, yes. And so those are just a couple maps to show like where, like it's just green along the whole corridor, and then where there's intersection crossings now that are a bit safer for folks. And then the next slide, slide 24, gets into operations a bit. So, you know, we're not, level of service for vehicle delay is no longer a CEQA like impact. And now we look at vehicle miles traveled. So this is just looking at level of service and the delay, because in our general plan, we continue to keep a LOS standard along the corridors. Sacramento Avenue, actually, per our January 2024 update to our mobility element of our general plan, has a LOS standard of LOS E, I believe. Yeah, I think it's E, because it has a number of mixed use land uses across the corridor, and we anticipate it to be like high density, high pedestrian use along the corridor. But it's still like useful to note and the vehicle delay of the corridor. So the existing LLS along the whole corridor is generally pretty acceptable. LLC is something that most folks are fine with. The only area where we have a little bit of concern is at the Sunset or Solano intersection, where we have a LOSF. And then the future LOS at the map at the bottom shows the level of service when if there were no changes to the corridor at all, just with projected growth, how much do we anticipate the level of service to change? And you see that the Jefferson-Kegel intersection goes from LSC at both AM and PM to LSD and E. And then Solano goes from LSD to LSF. So when you get to the next slide, we analyze the corridor in relation to the proposed improvements, and though the level of service at Solano remains at LSF, Kegel and Jefferson improves to LSA/B with the roundabout option. And then the 5th Street intersection, that does, even with the improvements, that goes to LSD, but with the protected intersections, there is the, like, it's operating with a protected intersection to provide safety enhancements for pedestrians at that intersection. And if you go to the next slide, the corridor is generally considered a disadvantaged community. When we look at the median household income, the SACOG environmental justice area, and the CES, Jason.
Are you thinking the SB 535?
Yeah, 535.
That's the, oh my goodness.
I don't know
I just
why.
lost it as well. SB 535 is a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's the Senate Bill 535's definition of a disadvantaged community. So that's the map at the bottom, and as you can just generally see over these maps, it is a disadvantaged community. So when you go to the next slide, we're going to look at the severity of the disadvantaged communities based upon like potential grant applications. We do get some points if we were to apply for grants because we are along a disadvantaged area. But the reason why we're looking at these by segment is to kind of understand if there's areas that we should move forward with first than others. And then next slide is just a kind of throwback to community support of our efforts and how we incorporated feedback from our workshops into the development of the proposed concepts. There was a pretty, like I mentioned earlier, the vision and the themes of the corridor. We ended up just using the top 3 themes. We removed the regional connection because there was such a low percentage of support for that. During workshop 2, we went over the proposed concepts with some alternatives, and so there we presented some options where we showed whether folks would want the bicyclist facility at grade with the sidewalk, or if it were at different grade, separated from the sidewalk. And there was kind of mixed support on that for either one. But the reason why, given that there was mixed support, we kind of proposed the at grade with the sidewalk so that it provides a wider pedestrian or like path area for anyone to use. Because it's at the same level, but also because in talking with our public works folks, it is difficult to clean and manage a bike lane that is of a certain size and width that's like separated, and it would require potentially equipment that we don't have currently available. And so, having that at grade with the sidewalk will remove that issue where we have to like purchase new maintenance vehicles in order to maintain the facility and make sure that there's not debris in the bike lane. And then we'll go to the next slide on the benefit cost summary. And I just wanted to update these numbers for you. So with the updated costs, you're seeing a benefit cost ratio of 1.58. And that's all I'll get into on that. If you go to the next slide, on slide 30, it just breaks down the benefit cost ratio by corridor, by segment. So again, just because we were providing updated numbers and costs, I wanted to give you those updated numbers. And then next slide, we'll get into 31 on implementation and prioritization. So this is something we haven't presented to the TMI Commission yet, and it's on the what segments should we kind of move forward with first, and how can we prioritize the different segments. And we harken back to our themes for the corridor on the green corridor, the community streetscape, and the multimodal boulevard. And then we also add another criteria of deliverability. So if you go to the next slide, we scored each of the segments based upon some criteria we defined. So for example, the green corridor is like if we were able to implement green infrastructure to support active transportation. So you'll see like segment 6 gets a score of 0 because we're not adding any like greenscape landscaping to that area. Whereas along like the western area and the central area, there are some opportunities for us to, with the available right-of-way, add in landscaping. Another example would be like under multimodal boulevard, there's one that says close gaps in the pedestrian network. And so you'll see this marked to pretty much all across down except for at segment 6. And that's mostly because there weren't like any gaps to close, I think, and that's why it scores a bit lower. So overall, you'll see that the western area has an overall score of 24, the central area has a score of 28, and the eastern area has a score of 22. And then because we wanted to weight these scores with the use of the corridor, we weighted it to the kind of a VMT rating, a vehicle miles travel rating. So we took into account how many folks are traveling along these segments, what's their average daily vehicle miles traveled, and the segment length, and use that as a weighting factor. So with these this VMT rating, the western area has a score of 15, the central area a score of 7.2, and the eastern area a score of 2.4. And throughout this project, I hit on a few of it, but we did, if you go to the next slide, on slide 34, I just wanted to hit back on the outreach and engagement we've done along this plan. So we did a corridor walk audit when we launched and kicked off the project in November 2022. We've done a few workshops with the public in August 2023 and May of 2024. We were recently at the bike rodeo in the riverfront area and had a booth there that kind of with plans that showed the proposed improvements, and we heard a lot of good feedback from folks that really supported the Class 4 separated bike lanes and the roundabouts. We've had focus group meetings with Yellow TD to get their feedback on the bus stops and what kind of options they would like to see at the bus stops. And then we did our big community workshops back in March of 2023 and October 2023. And we continually taken on online engagement through our website, where folks had been able to use this web browser and point to certain areas of the corridor and like note what concerns they had at those areas or what improvements they'd like to see along those areas. And that online kind of surveying activity closed in January, and that was also wrapped into our proposed concepts. So if you go to the last slide for tonight, we've again released the draft plan today, so it's on our website. It's attached to the agenda report. It's available for public comment until June 7th, and then we'll try to incorporate all that feedback, respond to those comments, and go to City Council with the final plan during the summer. I'd also like to note that we're currently underway with an active transportation program grant for moving forward with the next steps of this plan. We received congressionally directed earmarks. How would I say?
CDS, congressionally directed spending. That's where we apply with the help of Senator Padilla, Congresswoman Matsui, who provides an earmark in the president's budget, which was signed by the president, and we received funding through that, an amount of $2 million.
It was 1.6 something, and then city has to provide a match, so of 20%, so that the total funding available, because we're providing a match, would be near a little over 2 million. And that's to help us move into the next phase, which would be environmental and design. And so, yes, with this is the end of my presentation. And if there is any feedback TMI Commission would like to provide, this is the time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I want to say, even though we've heard all of these subjects before, I always learn something new, and I see something new in these presentations. So I really appreciate you coming back to us and presenting the final plan. So commissioners, any comments, questions?
Actually, I have a few comments, and first of all, I thank you really for presenting this again. I really like the roundabouts, and maybe that is an opportunity for additional funding. Might be a long shot, but what I've seen is that you could actually display art in the middle. So bringing communities together, which I think that's also kind of an idea behind this. So maybe there's a way to attract additional funding in some sort of by doing that. Idea.
Stephanie is applying for the ATP funds for the design. So because of all this work that she's done and our consultants have done, there is sufficient, purpose behind, receiving grant funds. So I feel pretty confident that we're in good position on that.
Yeah, looking at this plan, it really does look like Sacramento Avenue has the potential to be one of the most beautiful boulevards in our whole city. So that's a really wonderful thing. And like you said, the roundabouts provide a great canvas for that. I would love to see preference given to local artists if bids are taken for art, just to really drive home that really strong pride that we have in our city and the residents within. I know sometimes art projects can be, artists can come in from other states, other parts of the country, and I'd love to see West Sac talent being showcased for that. I had a couple questions real quick. And I know we've spoken about the roundabouts and the pedestrian crossings at the roundabouts itself having because there's no signals there's going to be the sort of push button signals that would light up the crosswalk and allow pedestrians to cross there. I was wondering if further down the corridor, where they're maybe in between the roundabouts, the crossings across Sacramento from north side to south side, if there is any sort of standardization or maybe one sort of way that pedestrians are going to be able to get across when they're actually trying to cross Sacramento Avenue. Or will they also have the lit push button crossings?
Yes. So if you go back to the segment concepts, you'll see them in the plan. If you look very closely, I'm sure it's kind of difficult to see. But if you look at like Simon Terrace right now, through our Highway Safety Improvement Program project, there is currently is proposing that flashing beacon to cross for that north-south crossing. With the SACAP plan, because we are like widening a lot and adding landscaping, that will need to be adjusted a bit if we move forward with like this proposed concept. But you'll also see at Douglas, for example, there's a new crossing proposed at Douglas to provide and that's also like with the flashing, high visibility flashing marking to indicate pedestrian crossing.
Great. Yeah, as we heard in our public comment today, our residents do like to drive pretty fast. So I really do appreciate those flashing crossing signs. I see that they're extremely effective on Capitol Avenue, which I think has been a wonderful test kitchen for all these concepts. And so thank you very much for that. Let's see. You mentioned that that this Sacramento Avenue is is a truck route for West Sacramento. I think that there had been some comment in previous presentations that through things like the roundabout, things like the lane diet on Sacramento Avenue, that it's all of this may be kind of in a roundabout way, trying to maybe discourage our shipping and commercial truck traffic from using Sacramento Avenue, and perhaps maybe routing them more towards Capitol, where, and I wanted to know if that was, part of the design, part of the mindset of city staff. I personally would love it if that was the case.
So the locations of our truck routes that Sacramento Avenue typically serves would probably be like the State Streets food market area, because they're the grocery store. And then also there's some kind of industrial kind of shipping land uses on like E and F Street. Otherwise, there's also like when you get off of the 80 and you're on Reed as it turns into Sacramento Avenue, you are near the IKEA, Walmart, all those, that huge big shopping center, right? So yes, we previously discussed like shifting. I'll say it this way: we've discussed actually completely removing Sacramento Ave as a truck route option. So we think that the folks that are on E and F Street on Jefferson can be reached just by going off, rerouting those trucks and making them drive on the freeway and get off on Jefferson.
Yes.
And going north up to the E and F Street area. And then, we can just stop the truck route before it hits the roundabout, and they can still exit from I-80 to get into the IKEA, Walmart shopping center, River Point shopping center area. And then we could also continue to allow the truck routes to go up to the State Streets supermarket. State Foods supermarket. I think I'm mixing up the name of the neighborhood. State Food Supermarket, that's north of Jefferson and Sac Ave at the north east corner. And our roundabouts are designed with the diameter and radius to support trucks. So we believe that we have to go through a process where with Caltrans, to formalize all of this and figure it out. We've initiated some conversations with them, and they think that because we do have alternative routes to those trucking needs, it's okay to remove Sac Ave as a local truck route facility. So it's something to be further explored.
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, as someone who lives in a neighborhood in which Capitol and Jefferson border it on two sides, that's not always great for me, but I'm more than willing to take that sacrifice to kind of have, keep Sacramento Avenue as more of a smaller vehicle and micromobility centered and catered to corridor.
Yeah. Oh, and to note, West Capitol isn't on our truck routes, so if you see anyone trucking on that.
And is trucking sort of classified as like 18-wheelers, trailer trucks, and box trucks? What is?
It depends. So the STAA routes, are supposed to accommodate some of the larger truck vehicles. We can't prohibit trucks in general. I mean, you're going to have moving trucks. You're going to have, just normal vehicles. But for regular deliveries, we can regulate that through our truck route maps.
Right.
There was a time back in the day when Sacramento Avenue was a major trucking corridor. It is no longer that, and so it's appropriate for us to take a second look at it and find alternative routes.
Yeah, and of course I know they're big backbone of our economy. Valued residents of businesses and people that work here. But of course, you have to balance that with what sort of wear and tear it has on our roads, and which is a major issue, of course. I'm happy that that's being considered here. So thank you very much.
I had a question about, are there any plans to bring roundabouts to other parts of the city besides Sacramento Avenue, like West Capitol Avenue?
There was a plan some time ago on West Capitol Avenue near Sycamore, but that was abandoned simply because of the amount of right-of-way, and it required additional take, and it wound up not being feasible from that standpoint, and it didn't provide enough benefit. So in order to move forward with these, there's a whole variety of considerations, but namely, is it functioning the way that you want it to function? So is there a problem that you're trying to correct? That one in West Capitol, it was a solution to a problem that didn't exist. So, you know, we do see here that there is a problem. We do have a high level of accidents and some severe accidents. We do have issues at the intersection. So it is an appropriate location. So we try to balance that out. There are other locations. Village Parkway is a good example. There are a number of, I believe, another 3 or 4 roundabouts that are going to be put in with the Liberty development down in Southport. We're also looking over at Jefferson and Davis Road over in that location where there's, I think it's 5 points that all kind of, over by the fire station, that all kind of meet in one location. There's like 5 or 6 intersections all conglomerated into one spot, and that's definitely an ideal location for us to consider, you know, the safety of the traffic movement there. And that's being considered with future developments like Yarborough that are going to be moving in, because we know if we are increasing the population in those southern areas, it's just going to make that situation exacerbated. So we want to make sure that we're addressing these on a case-by-case basis.
A question about timeline. So yeah, the final plan, we're, well, here. Well, I mean, it says we're here as in draft, but isn't this the final?
This is the draft plan for public comment, and then we'll incorporate or respond to public comment and bring the final plan for adoption.
Okay, great. That's exciting. So, you know, any ballpark ideas about when we could potentially see some construction going on?
It's very early. So I could probably give you a more confident answer once we win grant funding for and complete the design. But like any major project such as this, we've got to baby steps it. So I'm very happy that we're at the point we are. I think Stephanie's done an amazing job along with our consultants. I would love to win some design grant funds. Once we get through that 2 or 3 year process, we'll talk.
All right, thank you.
I just have one question. Because I live on Solano Avenue, why does it get an F? Why is it the only place with a level of service of F?
I need to look into a little bit more, but Solano is is it signalized?
No signal there, no.
No, I think that's why, because I think it's like the turning movements out of it.
Not easy.
Like those folks might be waiting a while when they come out of Solano and try to turn left or right, and that's probably where the issue is. And then there might be, because at the drive across the street, there's the it's not a cafe,
There's
it's
a
like the
cafe
grill.
there,
Cornerstone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it also considers those driveways into, like, when you're trying to turn out of it, how long it might take that person.
That tracks. It can take a while to turn left. Thank you. I was just curious. I think with that, we are wrapping up this agenda item. Thank you very much for the thorough discussion, everybody. And we still have a few more things to do. We're going to move on to part 2 of the general administration function. I believe one section is staff reports. Are there any additional staff reports?
I just want to say congratulations to the city of West Sacramento and to Stephanie. We were recently awarded the American Planning Association Sacramento Valley Section Award of Merit for the Sidewalks and Transportation Equity program. So we are going to be submitting to the state for a possible statewide award on that.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And we made it to the APA conference, so if anyone is going to the American Planning Association conference, state conference in Riverside, we'll be presenting on our plan there too.
Oh, very cool.
You might remember the Mobility Action Plan. We won the same award, Award of Excellence, and we're presenting at the APA as well. So we're carrying on a tradition of the last few years, winning many awards. So we're very happy.
Yeah.
That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next item is the commission calendar. I believe our next meeting is in July, although I'm not sure what date. Is it
July
a holiday?
1st, yes.
Is it a holiday?
July 4th, I think, is the holiday, but our commission clerk could tell me if we're still looking at the 1st. We'll inform the commission if there's a change to that date, but it looks like now it's going to be that
July
date.
1st. All right, thank you. And with that, the next item is to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay. Second, do we need to vote on this? No. And with that, we're going to adjourn.
All right.
Well,
Thank you.